Welcome to Illuminate. I am so excited to be in front of you today and even more thrilled to have a friend of mine, a former sumo, a customer. The only thing I can say about this guy that's bad is his taste in basketball, but you don't have to go there. Spencer Chin from HackerOne, who I absolutely love the company, and this is a great guy. Spencer, welcome.
George, great to be here and really excited to chat a little bit about our respective FedRamp journeys today. Really appreciate you having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, man. So let's get into it a little bit. The challenge of this is FedRamp's not easy. I tell people all the time that in my long career, I don't want to show my age completely, but 20 plus years, FedRamp's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It's just a never ending journey. There's a lot of steps to it. Every organization does it differently. I was super excited that HackerOne started going down this path as well too, because we're great partners. But we're going to look at just some of the different options, have an open discussion, just a fireside chat on questions and different paths people can take. Like one of the things I'm asked about all the time, Spencer, is where are you at in your journey? How did you get there? And so let's just kind of help folks out understand like how both of our companies got there. But before we get too deep into it, please just give us an overview of HackerOne, the great service you provide, because we use you guys, we love you guys, and how the federal government could use you guys moving forward.
Yeah, totally. I'd be happy to. So HackerOne is an attack resistance management platform. And at a high level, what that means is we help our customers, including Sumo Logic, become more resistant to attacks by criminals by utilizing an army of ethical hackers that will find vulnerabilities so that you can fix them before they're exploited by bad actors. We do this through a variety of different mechanisms, but the ones that I think are going to be really relevant in our discussion today are our vulnerability disclosure programs, or VDPs, as well as our bug bounty programs. Vulnerability disclosure programs are basically the digital equivalent of a see something, say something program, where you are just providing a standardized mechanism for ethical security researchers to report vulnerabilities to you. And bug bounties are going to take this to the next level by starting to incentivize that research to happen. So you can target assets or portions of your attack surface that you're really interested in testing thoroughly.
That's awesome, man. And just a quick note for those of you out there, our customers, we appreciate prospects as well too. We've been using HackerOne 4 years. I sit on their cab. I don't really ever talk about all the different cabs I sit on, but I value this company so much. They're good people that I'm more than happy to represent them anywhere. And the value that we've gotten out of HackerOne with our bug bounty program has just done so much for us as to securing our platform and building trust with our customers. So thank you for that. So with that, let's jump into this whole thing about Fed. So why don't you start off and just give us an idea of when you guys got certified?
Yeah, so we've had a pretty extensive history of working with the federal government, and as you're well aware, most federal agencies require their cloud vendors to be FedRamp authorized. So it was back in 2016 we ran a time-bound bug bounty program called Hack the Pentagon, and it was pretty prolific. It was about 13 minutes after we launched, we found the first vulnerability, and we had 200 submissions in the first 6 hours. So this told the Department of Defense that, hey, there's something to be, around this attack resistance management that we need to dive into. And so that led to us launching the Department of Defense's VDP and also the General Services Administration Technology Transformation Service, Vulnerability Disclosure Program, and Bug Bounty Program. And GSA was the first federal civilian agency to launch a VDP and bug bounty program, and they actually ended up becoming our agency sponsor for our initial FedRamp authorization. That was back in 2017, and we got our tailored low impact SaaS authorization a little bit after that. And then now we're starting to explore going to FedRamp moderate to help unlock more of that business on the federal side.
I think that's great. And I remember this specifically from one of your conferences, like you guys going through this use case, and that's really incredible. And again, that's a lot of the value that comes in. But let's talk a little bit about the low impact SaaS versus moderate. So because we're a logging company, as you know, we had to go after moderate first.
Sure.
But I do commend the fact that you guys made the initial investment into low impact SaaS because it got you started down the journey. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know, which, for me, like one of the things that I always tell people, Spencer, is build a proper business case. You have to have something in play that you're shooting for. And a lot of it is around, let's face it, sales. Like maybe 10x revenue that you could possibly get, trust into different agencies, commercial support from customers as well too. So before you decide on low impact SaaS or moderate, and I encourage a lot of you to like not even start thinking about high. We can have that discussion anytime you want, but like make sure that you're building a proper business case. Now, before we pivot too far away from that, what are some of the benefits that you guys have seen so far? And then I'll describe ours as well too.
Yeah, no, the point you made about the business case is paramount, right? And that was ultimately from the sales front why we started investing in this. Because, to work with most of the DoD programs, they're at an impact level 4, which is, kind of equivalent to FedRamp moderate. So to further our experimentation in that federal, or not experimentation, but further our progress there, that's really why we're looking at that FedRamp moderate certification, because we just did a Hack US pilot program for an ongoing bounty program over the 4th of July. And that was awesome. Like we spent $110,000, found hundreds of vulnerabilities in like 8 hours before they had to close the submission window because it was so prolific. So there's obviously a ton of business and value there, right? Like we're uncovering vulnerabilities that are directly impacting the security of the United States. And so that's a worthwhile investment. And so part of that is figuring out, what does that business look like? And then what do we need to do to our platform in order to enable that business? So I really think that's a great point that you made around the business case and why we're looking at going to that next step and going from tailored SaaS up to moderate.
Yeah, and that's great. And I love the fact of how you keep on going back to the value that you're providing the federal government, DoD, agencies, because I feel like that's where we're all kind of at in tech is like we really want to help. And when you have those values ahead of time, it makes everything else easy. But having that business case ahead of time is huge because it's going to have significant impact to the organization, which we're going to get to in a second. For us, a lot of the benefits besides value, like you just stated, that have really helped have been potential breaches. Like, for example, I hate calling what happened to Okta a breach because in my mind, it had minimal impact. But one of the things I checked for right away, Spencer, was, holy crap, Okta possibly got breached. Were we affected by it? And then I looked at the blogs, and David Bradbury did a good job of trying to keep people up to date live on their blogs. And one of the things he said right away was, if you're using our federal deployment, don't worry about it. Third-party contractors can't touch it. You're good. And it was like, whew. And so I think the extra amount of rigor that it comes with FedRamp can be a double-edged sword, but a lot of times can really pay off. And so there's a lot of benefits to having that kind of rigor within your FedRamp environment. So I think we're both doing two things. Like we're seeing a lot of value that we're providing and helping the federal government, as well as the way that we're architecting this also has internal benefits with rigor. But now let's talk a little bit with transparency because there's a lot of people that are learning from both of our collective journeys. Name any pitfall that you've seen out there. Like what's one thing that you've seen or two things that you've seen where you've been like, gosh, like this kind of set us back a little bit.
Totally. If I pick two things, cost and complexity, right? And those are definitely the two things, right? Like you touched a little bit on that, like that operational rigor, it truly is a double-edged sword, right? There are there's 300 something odd controls in FedRamp moderate with the new revisions that you have to comply with. And that's a lot of operational complexity and there's an overhead cost associated with it. And I'm thankful, like I got introduced to this when I was at Sumo from you and your team and some of the things that went into it because it's certainly not easy. So those are probably the two pitfalls, right? Is the cost and complexity that come along with it. But on the other side, that's why that business case is so important, is it's not just that federal business that it unlocks, but also security conscious customers, that are just in the commercial space are also very impressed by that certification as well, and rightfully so.
Oh man, you nailed so many things there. You know, when we did the original business case, as you know, when you were at Sumo, it was all about ARR and all about our commercial customers who we wanted to help, and we had to be part of their fabric as they supported the federal government. But then, like the pitfalls, like for us, because you're dead on with what you said, with us, it was also the emotional transition through the organization. The effects that it has on development can really be strenuous. I'll give you a great example. There are some things about FedRamp that you're just going to have to do. And for us, one of the big ones was we had to do DNSSEC. And because we're, just like you guys, a progressive platform, DNSSEC just sort of didn't make sense to us at the time, but we went ahead and did it anyway. And there was some technical debt that came with that. Mm-hmm. And so our developers were like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this? We don't get it. Because while you're going through the process, you're not immediately seeing the value. It takes some time, and the sales cycles are a little bit different. They're a little bit longer. And yes, if you focus on the key things that you said about providing value to the federal government, helping people out, you can get through those things. But that emotional transition is just huge. And if I'm a developer, I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, I could build more feature functionality into the platform, or do I have to do this FedRamp thing? And so just one of the things that I'd like to give people out there, and this is just straight up advice from someone who's been beat up a lot on both sides and made some mistakes, is as you're going through those emotional transitions, just try to up-level the FedRamp conversation to business decisions, company policy. We're doing these things for the benefit of our customers, like you said, for the benefit of sales, because it is an emotional transition. It's going to have a lot of impact, especially on development, but the organization as a whole. And so I think getting that out there early, having those discussions, having transparency, and especially working closely with your developers on architecture is really, really going to help. So thank you for that input. And so let's go a little bit down further into the details. So I think you already answered this, but the journey, so we have the jab, which is a total pain in the ass, and I'm just going to say it now, because they force you to use like all jab certified products, which means that you can't use a lot of cool stuff out there. Like, for example, you can't use Sumo if you're part of the jab. You can't use things like Jira, PagerDuty, HackerOne. And it's just, to me, it's kind of absurd. And so we hope that changes. But we went down that route for a while, and then agency. So you guys went down the agency route, and what have you guys seen as far as benefits there?
Yeah, so exactly. So the General Services Administration, or GSA, was our agency sponsor for our FedRamp tailored LISAS. And I think there were a couple things that I learned. So I synced up with our compliance and our technical team. And when you're talking about DNSSEC, from a technical perspective for us, one thing we learned is like your overall vulnerability count is important regardless of the severity. And so we had to bump the operating system on all of our production machines because we had too many CVEs on the version we were using, even though most of them were very low severity. So again, when you you're saying, hey, I can spend engineering resources on this, bumping this OS, or spend it on developing new features and functionality that delight our customers, there's those trade-offs, right? So same thing that you went through with DNSSEC. I think also on the technical side of the house, make sure that the agency trusts the tools that you're using, or use the tools that they tell you. It's going to make the process much easier. I won't go into the specific tools that we had to change, but I think that's the general guidance from the technical perspective. From the compliance side of the house, there were two things. Being in lockstep with our agency sponsor was really invaluable because they helped us identify the right approach and helped ensure that our documentation was in order for evaluation by other agencies. And then the second thing was that our compliance team strongly recommends enlisting the support of an experienced advisor who's been there and done it before. Because once they've helped another company through it, they can be really invaluable in helping you through that journey as well, because you don't know what you don't know when you're going through it for your first time.
Yeah, that's facts, man. Like, partnering up with your sponsoring agency is such a good point. We've been through two, so we started off with FTC, who was a great sponsor, but then the SolarWinds vulnerability hit, and they had to kind of refocus. Still Sumo fans, still using the product, but we couldn't lockstep in the timing that we needed from a sponsor, especially while we were going through SARS. So now we have Indian Gaming Commission. Big shout out to them. They've been a really good sponsor for us as well too. But you are so correct in aligning with them. And then a tidbit for you, those of you out there going through the journey, it gets more complex the more agencies you have. So we have 27 authorizations now. And so keeping all of them open to partnerships. We have a weekly call to where we say, hey, just drop in. Here's a short agenda. We're going to tell you about our open vulnerability disclosure program. Again, thank you, HackerOne, and some of our partners there. But be in lockstep with them is so, so important. You are absolutely correct. And I also like the agency route too, because I think they're a little bit more risk lenient. Like I'll give you guys a great example. We recently built out a PaaS platform to be able to deploy quicker to AWS. And within that PaaS platform, because it's all based off of Kubernetes and Docker, we had to run vulnerability scans within it before it hits prod. Now, FedRamp's mind is run everything in prod. Well, with affirmable images, that makes no sense. And so agencies have been a little bit more lenient and forward thinking that way. So I'm just going to say it now. Like if you have a choice, go down the agency route. You just heard it from Spencer. That's what they're doing. That's what we're doing. But let's also work with the JAB and try to get the JAB to modernize a little bit and start thinking more about, advanced organizations like ours. One thing we skipped over that I want to make sure we touch on is this GovCloud question. I have a big opinion around this, but I'm going to hit you up first. What are you guys thinking? What do you guys, what does the future hold as far as deployments are concerned?
Yeah. So again, going back to cost and complexity, we're evaluating three different approaches, right, when it comes to GovCloud. And so, I'll talk a little bit about the approaches and then some kind of like the pros and cons. But, the three approaches we're looking at, the first one would be no separation. So entire product is authorized at a FedRamp moderate level. We're looking at a mirrored approach. So mirroring HackerOne in GovCloud, separate deployment for our federal customers. And then the third one would be a shared services approach, where we split HackerOne into components so that the federal data and information resides in GovCloud, and everything else is in our current region. At a high level, GovCloud is great since AWS does so much in terms of all those controls. With several hundred controls to comply with, the more that you can get help with, the better. But of course, the cons come around those resource and logistics limitations with GovCloud. So, as you know with Sumo, when we were looking at this, there's a lot of services that HackerOne and Sumo use that aren't in GovCloud. And so then you have to start re-architecting parts of your platform. You have two divergent platforms almost, and that increases the overhead for both maintenance and operations as well as new feature development. And then I think more specific to HackerOne, but also with Sumo, is that we have a really big international footprint on both the HackerOne side as well as our community of ethical hackers. And access to GovCloud is restricted to customers or to customers who are US persons. And so that introduces a lot of complication there as well. We're still very much in the evaluation phase of whether or not we're going to use GovCloud. I know Sumo didn't end up using GovCloud, I believe. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more, on what went into that decision for you.
Oh man, like it was the same things that you just described, cost, complexity. As you know, we have a good footprint in Poland, big international customer scene as well too, India. And then the services supported was really the main driver to not going there. And plus AWS stepped it up on their commercial offerings to have the right things like TLS encryption all the way to ALBs or ELBs, lots of different things they offered there. So it just made sense for us. But here's something I'll suggest to everyone too. Like we went out and polled all of our customers that had an interest in Fed and say, hey, are you gonna be pissed off if we go commercial, or is this a complete showstopper if we don't go into GovCloud? And we only had one come back and be like, hey, it's kind of a showstopper, but let's figure it out, as you guys move forward. Now, with that being said, Spencer, like we are and Sumo salespeople, you got to involve me first before you do any of this, but we are designing what's going to be a 5-year phased approach to high. And that will have to be in GovCloud. Now, it's at its infancy. We understand high, and like you said, IL4 and IL5 when it comes to DoD really well. We've done our homework. But at the same time, like that may be our only option. So we're going back and looking at what that looks like moving forward. But we're fans of GovCloud. We love what AWS is doing there. But at the same time, for us and our respective organizations, it sounds like it just wasn't a good choice. But for everyone else out there, hey, it may be your gig, man. Maybe your platform fits in nicely to it. So services are supported and you go in there and do a good job. So thank you for that insight, though, because I think it's one of those big things past what level do you go at? Do you go jab? Do you go down the agency route that you have to make a decision? And so you touched us on this a little bit, but just to give us an idea of your journey. So you guys are low impact SaaS, which is awesome. I've had the pleasure of meeting with your great team as well too, Russell and some other folks. But what are you guys thinking? So like with this whole moderate journey, like I know timelines are really rough, but where's HackerOne at with that? Because we're definitely interested being dual customers of each other.
Yeah, it's been very helpful. Like when I was gathering some information to fill in the gaps for places I wasn't as familiar, like our compliance and our technical teams had nothing but good things to say about the presentation you gave to them. And, having been through it before, it was invaluable for our team. So thank you. But for what's next for HackerOne, I think, like you said, starting with that business case, right? Like what kind of contracts does this unlock on the DoD side of the house? What are those and what level do we need to be? Then we need to evaluate the cost and level of effort associated with each of those three approaches I outlined. In the meantime, like federal business has been ramping up. Like it shows no signs of slowing down. So I think like the business case is there, but of course I'm on the sales side, so I'm a little bit biased, right? But yeah, that's just really what it involves, is just continuing to evaluate that cost and complexity of, GovCloud, of moving to FedRamp moderate, and kind of balancing that against all of the future business that unlocks on both the federal and the commercial side of the house.
Brilliantly said. And I'll say this, you call yourself a salesperson, which you are, and you're good at it, but you're also a very ethical person. And every time I've ever seen you, you're just more concerned about bringing value to your customers. So this last one, I'm actually going to take a stab at this first. When I think about like our open vulnerability disclosure program and how important that is, if you look at Biden's executive order, a lot of the stuff that's coming out through the federal government around tightening up, I think that it's paramount that companies, whether they're agencies or commercial companies that are servicing the federal government, look at modern day solutions like HackerOne and Sumo Logic. You guys just provide such a tremendous service, helping keep people secure. But there's also a hidden thing that you guys provide too that I think would really help out federal agencies, which is bringing in together teams. Like I remember at Sumo before we had HackerOne, yeah, we had a little bit of friction, right? Which is a natural thing with the development team. But all of a sudden, when we started running bounties, it was amazing like how in the same platform, like my team with our development team, with hackers would all talk through things and really make everything better. And I think agencies could probably use a little bit of help in that perspective, as well as with a lot of the mandates that are coming down. And then again, you mentioned it early up front, that open vulnerability disclosure program. But if there's anything else that I missed on, please bring it up now, because again, we love you guys as partners, and I just want people to have the awareness through Illuminate of the services that you guys do provide.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The thing I would really drive home is that human element, right? And there's just security automation cannot replace human intelligence, persistence, and collaboration, right? And we see that from the community side, finding the vulnerabilities. They're so creative. They're often very impactful. And so like you said, they spur really interesting conversations. The developer's like, wait, you're telling me they did what now, right? And then so you're starting to collaborate better internally. You have that collaboration between the hackers and your internal teams. So I think the human element is the thing that I would really drive home, is like security automation is awesome and you need to automate a lot of those low-level tasks, but you just can't replace human ingenuity and creativity at this point. And that's really the high-level value add that HackerOne brings, is that diverse perspective from our community of ethical hackers.
I love that, man. I mean, that is just so true. I mean, like there was even like social engineering stuff that you guys helped us out with tremendously. So you're right, the human element's huge. So this we'll just touch on really quickly. I don't know if a lot of people have seen it put this way, but what we did was we took Rev 4, and all this huge shout out to a gentleman on my team called Patrick Newcomb, who's like so deep into Fed that we recruited over years ago, one of the best decisions we ever made. He actually has a team now, which is great, but he helped me put this together. And what we're doing is we're starting to take a look at the current controls across the different offerings, and then what that's going to look like when Rev 5 comes out. And the only thing I really want to point out to our audience here is, man, privacy is going to be huge. It's huge across like PCI moving to 4.0. It's really big with the new SEC guidelines, and then FedRamp moving to Rev 5 as well too. So just keep an eye on that. We have an external Slack channel that HackerOne's part of. We are too, that was recognized by the federal government as being one of the best practitioner Slack channels. There's like no marketing nonsense in there. I mean, we even have competitors in there. It doesn't matter. We're all just learning from each other. This is a hard journey. So hit us up if you want to be part of that Slack channel, because we're really going to start diverting a lot of our focus past our next SAR to start helping people out and then learning from you as well too on what this means and the impact to the FedRamp community as a whole. So with that, let me just wrap up with 3 quick things. I think that you heard this from both Spencer and I, like number 1, build that proper business case and then reorient to it all the time. But that is step 1. It's hard to just say, hey, we're gonna go out and do FedRamp and put it on a roadmap unless you have that. Like the last thing you ever wanna do is say, we're gonna do FedRamp, we're gonna do it within a year because you're gonna get laughed out of the building and then not have substance behind it. So build that business case and that'll get the company going. The second thing is build that region, like figure out what you're gonna do. And again, you can switch back and forth here because there's pros and cons to both, but select a region, kind of stick with it. I think that HackerOne's got a really good approach to moderate with their 3 different ways that they're looking at it, but this is a really big decision. And so make sure that you have that in place. And then after the other one is pause. You know, like, Spencer, you're just gonna die laughing when I say this, man. But the funny thing is like we went through all that work to hit moderate, and then the first thing that our sales team asked for is, when are we going high? And it's like, nope, we're hitting the big pause button now, and we're gonna see where it got us. Does it align back to the business case? And then we're gonna start talking about what we do moving forward. So I think it's always good to have KPIs in place and then measure your success as to where you're at. So with that being said, like, look, I mean, Spencer, my guy, my dude, man, you're such a good person. Love your company. Thank you so much for participating with us here. You know, we just really love the partnership that we have, and thank you for helping educate our audience. And then we look forward to hearing back from you. So once this gets out there, we really want to hear back, like any questions that you guys have. I'll make sure we funnel that back to HackerOne and then to our teams at Sumo. But enjoy the rest of Illuminate. And again, Spencer, I'll give you some parting words, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure was all mine, and look forward to the next steps.
Awesome.